Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
So tell us about the Naḻakapāna Sutta, Majjhima number 68.
So in this discourse, the Buddha asks after the well-being of a group we call the Sakya Kumara, the Sakyan boys. And it's a group of monks that basically largely came from the Republic of Sakya, where the Buddha was born. First, he addresses all of them by the term Venerable Anuruddha, and it's an important piece of Pali parlance where an entire group can be addressed by the most senior member's nomer or name, and useful in the sense that when you hear discourse addressed to the bhikkhus, one can infer that actually, in many cases, there were a whole wealth of the Fourfold Assembly there, laymen, laywomen, bhikkhunis, etc. The Buddha is also speaking to you in those situations, or those people too. And Venerable Anuruddha basically responds saying, we're doing quite well. And the Buddha says, that is good. It is good that those gone forth in the holy life should live it joyfully, should find well-being here. You did not go forth because you were chased by kings. You went forth because you saw I am subject to birth, aging, and death, to suffering. There must be an end to this heap of suffering, and which is just beautiful. And so the fact that this holy life is joyful, even for those who had a great deal beforehand. He then says that one should practice basically giving up the hindrances, attaining deep concentration. And then he goes on to give a very interesting teaching where he basically says why the Buddha would often, when someone had passed away, would often say where their rebirth was, or if they had attained anything. And he says to Venerable Anuruddha, I do not do this to trick people or deceive people, but rather to inspire faith. There are some clansmen who find faith and gladness in lofty things. And similarly, when a bhikkhu hears that a bhikkhu has passed away and attained arahantship, that brings up gladness and leads to a good abiding. And similarly for the states of awakening lower than that, for bhikkhunis, for laymen, laywomen, it brings up faith, and this is why I do it. And this can be looked at perhaps as a preemptive teaching to Venerable Anuruddha, who would become foremost in the divine eye. It's saying, don't, be careful how you use these powers, which you will eventually get. Before this, and I forgot to mention this, the Buddha says, do you think I'm restrained out of kind of just thought and kind of consideration, or and decide what to pursue, what to avoid, what to endure through that? Or do you think I've really uprooted the defilements? And Venerable Anuruddha says, we think you have indeed achieved enlightenment. And he says, that is good. Indeed, the Tathagata has abandoned the defilements, has cut off becoming at the root, basically. Ajahn, what would you draw out of this?
Yeah, there's a teaching in the Anguttara, which the Buddha says, thus you should train yourself. Our minds will be thoroughly ingrained in the spirit of our going forth. And it's good to remember, if someone's about to disrobe, oftentimes someone who's trying to talk them out of doing that will say, what was your initial inspiration in the Dhamma? And I think it's good for whether we're gone forth, we're monastics, or we're lay people, to remember that. It's so easy as Westerners, as convert Buddhists, to just forget why we were initially inspired, and we lose our inspiration oftentimes way too easily, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So our minds will be thoroughly ingrained in the spirit of our going forth. So two ways that the Buddha suggests we do that. One is actually, as you said, recollecting we might go forth, or you get inspiration just as a young person, not out of fear, or not because any kings made us do it, or any thieves made us do it, or we're not in debt, but because we realize that, and this is a phrase in the sutta that we chant virtually verbatim every morning in the morning chanting, is all of us are bound by birth, aging, and death, by sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, bound by dukkha and obstructed by dukkha. Let us all aspire to complete freedom from suffering. We chant it in Pali and we chant it in English every morning as a way to remember, okay, that is why we do it. We're not compelled to do this, especially as Western monastics. We have to go through, a 2.5 year training period before we're allowed to ordain. So kind of weeds out people who might be doing it for the sake of livelihood, or because they're in debt, or because they're in government service or something like that. So remembering that inspiration, that we want to go beyond all of the dukkha of the world. And also the Buddha saying that he does talk about the rebirths or non-rebirths of people to inspire others. And certainly I think that was my own and others' inspiration to go forth after doing Goenka retreats. I remember reading the biography of Ajahn Mun, 20th century great forest saint in Thailand, who I came to have faith. Basically, it seems like I'm reading the biography of someone at the time of the Buddha, who is, and it's written by Lungta Mahabua, another great forest saint who lived up until 2009, but translated into English. And Lungta Mahabua was somewhat known for his capacity to know or to state the attainments of others. And this might be held with some skepticism by some people, but I've got a degree of faith in it that he would say, this teacher, so-and-so, had actually finished the work, was an arahant, etc. And hearing that, it's like, okay, this isn't something which is just the time of the Buddha, but is still a living tradition. If someone practices in these ways, keeps their virtue, practices samadhi, they can actually attain. It's not a dead tradition. So I found that personally inspiring. And also just one last thing to point to is the Buddha is saying that as long as one hasn't attained to the pleasure which is devoid of unwholesome states, which is truly secluded from sensual pleasures, that is jhanic states, certain mind states will enter the mind and remain. And he lists 7, actually, the traditional 5 hindrances of covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. But then he names 2 more, one of which is arati, or discontent, and the other one is tandi, or listlessness. And arati and tandi are actually 2 sub-causes in a different sutta for tinamida, or for sloth and torpor. So and this is something which a lot of people find, whether it's on meditation retreat, you come in the first 2 days, you're just totally discontent, lazy, you've got this sleep deficit, and the mind just wants to shut down. And you certainly find that in monasteries when someone, first ordains, and even it can persist of just wanting to turn off. That's an easy thing to do rather than to face our own suffering. So the Buddha pointing to this arati, discontent, and tandi, this listlessness, as other things to be looking out for before we attain the jhanas. So working with these 7 things. Yes, Ajahn, is there anything else you'd like to draw out?
One thing that came up while you were speaking was Venerable Anuruddha. You're right. He's speaking to Venerable Anuruddha about these defilements or hindrances. And actually, there's an interesting thread where the Buddha is instructing Venerable Anuruddha through his meditative path, through a few suttas. There's this at the very beginning, give up these hindrances, +2. And then in MN 128, the Upakilesa Sutta, he's talking about a very refined state of meditation with Venerable Anuruddha, where he talks about Venerable Anuruddha seeing forms and the forms disappearing and holding the meditation object like a bird. So I hadn't ever realized this connection where the Buddha's, seeing the Buddha's through line with one practitioner, again, carefully stewarding them through concentration. It's quite beautiful. The final thing I'd point out here is, the Buddha's care around displays of psychic power. How he's saying, this is why I do this. I'm the Tathagata to inspire faith. But the Buddha was very careful about this, where we have a rule against displaying psychic power to lay people. All monastics do. And the Buddha said that, a drawback of psychic power, I think this is in Digha Nikaya 11, is that someone may, report, oh, I saw this venerable one had this great psychic power, and the other person says, yeah, sure, basically. And it sort of destroys their faith. And the Buddha says, this is one reason I feel horrified, humiliated, and disgusted by the miracle of psychic power. Strong language, but he also says everywhere, like there's the mundane psychic powers or the un-Aryan of, reading minds, etc. And then there's the Aryan psychic power, the noble psychic power of seeing the repulsiveness as pleasant and the pleasant as repulsive, or equanimity, just how we can shift perception. So kind of a beautiful thing. And also the reason the Buddha was more free with talking about the attainments of a monastic after they had passed away, because he really wanted to avoid these cults of personality. So just an interesting nuance there, I think.
One other tiny thing to pull out is just the Buddha encouraging delight in the holy life, delight in this Buddhist life that we have. There's other suttas where he actually uses a different verbal tense to say, rejoice, rejoice. This is really an active part of the practice, which we should be looking for, ways to enjoy the practice, enjoy the holy life. So, Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is samyojana, which means fetter or bond, and comes from yuj, which means to yoke, and sang, which means together.
All right. Well, let's not be fettered.